no intro, straight onto the guides. Starting off with Winston. There's a lot of little things that can add up holistically, which I'll try to rattle through now. When pushing up to take space, try and hold on to your bubble for as long as possible and play corners to reduce incoming damage. When you're trying to dive backline, try and rotate to another position to close the distance so you can more easily dive onto their backline. For instance, on Temple of Anubis' second point, you could rotate right side to close the distance against their backline and maybe even save jump to escape using only speed boost to engage. Keep in mind, the point about saving HP and reducing incoming damage is very important, as you don't want to be diving in at half HP or without your bubble. In terms of communication, make sure to call out where and when you're engaging by simply saying you're going in or that you're engaging in order to make sure everything is well timed. Aside from that, there's nothing too much beyond the base, fundamental level to Winston, specifically in Talon Dive. Everything about your primal to isolate and kill a target, or to boot them into your team, or to utilize the terrain of your bubble, or to save leap to escape by engaging from high ground, all still apply. Moving on to D.Va. Stacking versus layering your matrix is very important, as you don't want to be stacking your matrix on top of your Winston bubble, but layering it after your Winston bubble breaks. In Talon Dive specific matchups, you want to be matrixing the opposing Reaper or high source of damage, and not just mindlessly planting your matrix in front of the other main tank, and wherever possible, try to find another angle or piece of high ground to end your boosters on when engaging. For instance, referring back to that example on Anubis' second point, you could fly to the high ground on point or swing to the right side of the map in order to matrix your Winston from a safer angle and being able to see what you want to matrix instead of stacking it on top of your Winston. You also control the space you're standing in, denying the enemy access to your angle. In terms of bomb usage, make sure to not bomb engage, as it can be very easy for mobile teams to kite a bomb and it can leave you vulnerable without matrix, meaning that if your team plans to aggressively push off a D.Va bomb, the enemy team could use Barrage, Blossom, or any ultimate that's pretty important to eat. Instead, aim to bomb to remake in the mid-fight, and sometimes you can purposefully do this by inting onto one target. Moving on to Reaper, Tracer, and Sombra, who have all grouped up into one category due to the similar playstyles in this comp. Firstly, in Talon Dive mirrors, or up against a traditional brawl comp, which by the way, I've already made a guide on, link in the top right, look to establish soft off angles around the enemy team, while still being within range of your Moira spray, in order to ensure that the enemy team can't hide from damage. Here's an example given by Spilo and Fafa.
Nobody from Shock can stabilize here because of Reaper, and nobody from Shock can stabilize here because of Sombra. So you're absolutely right.
You know, they also have angles, so now they're pressuring here, forcing this D.Va to make an option of like, do I want to DM the Sombra, do I want to DM the Reaper, do I want to DM these guys?
The other thing that you can touch on as well, the reason why map control is good is not just because of like the vision manipulation that you're describing, but it's also because cover just doesn't exist. Like Winston can't stop taking damage here. He can't stop taking damage here. He can't stop taking damage here. There is nowhere to hide because of the angles that allow people to shoot continuously. There never is any corner.
Secondly, building off this further, especially on Tracer Sombra, look to flank behind the enemy team to split focus, as Natter describes here.
As Tracer, if you're going in main, you're going to pressure Winston. The D.Va is just going to DM you. You're not going to get that much value. So whenever you're retaking, you don't have ultimates, think flank. If you flank and you sort of get on someone else, so let's say the Tracer sort of comes around here, and Tracer pushes from here, and the rest of your team pushes here, and the Tracer says, hey, I can go up, I can pressure Moira, and your Tracer pressures the Moira will instantly fade back out or fade somewhere, and when that happens, your team has an advantage. Or maybe the D.Va has to turn to peel. D.Va has to turn to peel the Tracer, and then the D.Va's not DMing Winston, and then your Reaper gets insane value.
Thirdly, here's SwordOW explaining the hack and EMP usage of Sombra and Talon Dive up against the bull comp.
He's looking to play with his team, get a hack as his team's going forward, farm as his team's walking forward. Something else to keep in mind is if he's not playing with his team and deathballing with his team to get the value, he's looking to counter the ball. He's hacking the ball before he's able to get into slam. He's hacking the ball before he can get into roll. He's going to look to utilize these EMPs instead of capitalizing on enemy mistakes or enemy aggression. He's going to look to utilize it to go very aggressive when Outlaws try to take space, specifically the backline, when they try to go through chokes, when they try to go towards the point as a group.
This nicely leads me onto ult usage. For Tracer, it's pretty straightforward in terms of landing your sticks on squishies, and especially in the mirror at least, up against a Moira who hasn't got fade or is in coalescence. For Blossom, it's best used in the mid-fight where there aren't many cooldowns available to stop it, and it can also be a great counter against EMP. It's not uncommon to see a Lucio beat with Reaper's Blossom to be paired together to counter an EMP, since the enemy is hard tunneled into focusing down on a single target. Lastly, here's a very simple but effective timing tip, which is to time your pressure half a second after your tanks engage. In terms of why you want to do this, I'll use this example. Say a Winston jumps the opposing Zen, and you appear to follow up half a second after your Winston engages. The enemy Zen isn't going to be looking at you playing Tracer or Sombra most likely, but he'll be looking at the Winston instead. In essence, the utilization of your tank's baiting attention will maximize the value that you receive. Moving on to Lucio. Simply put, hide from EMP, don't stack all your mobility cooldowns to engage, and consider saving amp to escape and play slow, and to most importantly, clear flankers, as Natter explains here.
Your job is to deny the flankers. So if the Tracer's trying to, get some value, if the Reaper's for some reason teleporting behind trying to get some value, your job as Lucio is to pressure them and try and force them out. Why are you forcing them out? Well, if you don't, that Reaper or that Tracer could essentially go on your Moira and pressure your Moira. And then if your Moira is under pressure, your Moira might fade back or fade into the team. And if either of these things happen, then the enemy team is like, oh, their Moira has no fade, she's right over here. They'll just push the Moira. And one thing I'll add is Sombra can hack, and Lucio can maybe mark the Sombra, but Moira, going into Moira can right click and just quickly stop that hack, and that's really useful.
This nicely leads me on to Moira, who is an even simpler hero to explain. Use your Coalescence to engage, primarily use heal orbs, force out flankers such as Sombra from a distance, and tap your Biotic Grasp instead of holding it down to gain your spray back faster. Moving on to the macro section, and there's a lot to go through. Firstly, one of the most important concepts to grasp is that you can play very fast, but due to each hero having mobility, you can also play very slow, as Natter explains here.
Winston has jump, D.Va has fly, Reaper has wraith, Tracer has blinks and recall, Sombra has translocate out, Echo has shift, Lucio has amp or just Lucio, Moira has fade. Because of this, you're able to play really fast, and what most people don't know is you can play really slow. So fast, you can just speed in and just go on somebody and go really hard. But you can also play really slow. You could, have your Tracer go touch point, and then your Tracer get off point. Your D.Va can touch point. And you can sort of just trade point and sort of what I call ping pong, just really slowly and just buy time and maybe play for ultimates and then go forward. Or maybe the enemy team engages with Coalescence and you just sort of want to live. So you guys sort of just jump out and you live. The enemy uses Coal and maybe you push back with your own Coal. And your Winston holds close, so they use it really early. They pressure Winston, but he just jumps out.
Building off that, the general overarching win condition is to eliminate a target very quickly and then escape and play slow to gain back resources and then rinse and repeat. That process described about switching from playing fast to playing very slow can be described as ebb and flow or push and pulling. Here's Natter showcasing and putting a twist on this push and pull concept.
Team CC pushed into them, then White Mode kited as like 1, then White Mode decided to push back in with their Coal, right, which is 2. Team CC then kited as their 2, but during this 2, okay, what Team CC did is what I like to call like split focus. They decided to send a Winston behind. So when White Mode is pushing forward, that push becomes really hard, right? And what ends up happening is White Mode now, instead of this, right, what has to happen is some people are going forward, but some people have to turn for this Winston. So now their push gets split, which then in theory, right, when this push ends up dying, this will then allow Team CC to push back in hard, right? And then it'll be very hard for White Mode, because now they're split, for them to be able to kite later. This concept can also, you can sort of imagine this concept, by the way, with a Reaper.
One of the very key ideas mentioned in that Winston section to help fulfill that win condition is to rotate to close the distance. But you can also force point to debate the enemy in coming closer, as Spilo gives an example of here. Also note Sombra's positioning as a bonus.
Point pressure, or just the fact that you control point, forces the enemy team to actually push up at some point to cap, because if they don't, you're going to capture point and you're going to go over here and like smoke cigars and drink martinis. At some point, Houston has to start aggressively pushing a flank or pushing point. They have to press W at some point in some way. They're going to start pressuring point, right? And again, okay, Jengu's going in, right? Okay, but who's getting value out of that? Nobody in Houston can get anything out of this. So Jengu goes in, he's going to get hacked or pressured, and then as they get baited forward, because you notice what Houston are doing as Jengu goes in? Watch. Bang! They've walked right into the trap, and in fuel goes. Not only do you want to kill box once the enemy team walks close enough for you to be able to execute, they also have a pincer. They have an angle. So Outlaws can't just press S key and just back up, because as they're backing up, they're running right into the Sombra.
Before I end off the video, I wanted to highlight a wrecking ball variation of this comp, as Lucid describes here.
Ball, meanwhile, is a way more consistent hero. Ball is harder to force out of the backline than Winston, meaning that he can be a persistent annoyance. Second, while Ball has the option of pile driving, he doesn't have to get value. He can shoot the enemy from behind to distract them, as well as uses grapple to boop enemies to bad positions. And since Ball can get a lot done without having to commit, he forces out a lot of abilities from the enemy, which reduces their ability to engage. While the enemy Winston is stuck in the front line fishing for an opportunity, Ball can go into the enemy backline early to get into the fight. He can harass the enemy backline with his primary fire, forcing them to use the resources to peel. He can help his DPS win duels on the flanks, giving them better positions to work with. And he can use grapple to boop enemies into his team or off of high ground, which his team can then look to punish.
Well, that's the video. Until next time.